Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the starship Defiance and watched something that should not exist. The alien structure stretched across 3 entire star systems like a massive web of dark metal and pulsing lights. Every scanner on the ship screamed warnings, but Jake could not look away from the sight before them. Dr. Lisa Park ran from station to station checking readings that made no sense. She had studied alien life for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for this. The structure was not just big, it was impossible. The energy readings alone should have torn apart any known material, yet there it sat in space like it belonged there. "Captain, we are getting something strange from the deep scans," said Ben Carter from his position at the communications console. His voice shook as he spoke and sweat covered his forehead despite the cool air on the bridge. "What kind of strange, Ben?" Jake asked as he moved closer to look at the readings. The numbers on the screen made his stomach turn cold. This was not just an alien ship or space station. This was something much worse. Lisa looked up from her scanner with wide eyes full of fear. "Captain, this thing is a graveyard. There are remains of 17 different species inside that structure, all of them dead, all of them more advanced than we could ever hope to be." The bridge fell silent, except for the soft hum of the ship systems. Jake felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. 17 dead alien races meant this was not just a discovery, it was a warning of what could happen to humanity. Commander Rachel Davis joined them from the tactical station with her tablet full of scan results. "Sir, I have been analyzing the construction methods and technology levels. Each species represented here had capabilities far beyond ours. The Zorathians could control the energy of entire stars. The Kethmori had evolved beyond physical bodies into pure information. The Valdris Empire could move planets with their minds alone." "Then what killed them?" Jake asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Ben suddenly straightened in his chair as new data flowed across his screens. "Captain, I am picking up a transmission from deep inside the structure. It appears to be some kind of recorded message broadcast in thousands of languages, including what looks like an early form of human speech." The impossibility of that statement hit everyone at once. Humans had only been in space for a few hundred years and had never contacted alien life before this moment. How could any alien race know human language, especially an ancient form of it? "Put it through the translators," Jake ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a voice that sounded tired and desperate despite being who knows how old. "Run," the voice said in clear English. "They come for all who think, all who grow, all who dream. The harvest has begun again, and none can stand against them. We were the Valdris, and we ruled 1,000 worlds, but we fell like grass before the storm. Run while you still can." The message repeated in dozens of other languages before cutting to static. The bridge crew looked at each other with growing horror as the meaning became clear. Something out there hunted intelligent life and collected civilizations like trophies. Lisa found her voice first. "Captain, there is more. I am detecting massive computational systems throughout the structure. These beings did not just kill these species, they preserved them somehow. Every mind, every culture, every piece of knowledge has been stored in digital form." Rachel checked her tactical displays and found readings that made no sense. "Sir, we have been scanned multiple times since we arrived. Something knows we are here, and it has been studying us." Jake felt ice form in his veins as the full picture became clear. Earth had been broadcasting radio signals into space for over a century. Television, internet, satellite communications, all of it flowing out into the galaxy like a beacon announcing that intelligent life existed on their small blue world. "Ben, get me a secure channel to Earth Command immediately. Priority Alpha emergency protocols," Jake ordered. "Lisa, I want everything you can learn about these preserved civilizations downloaded and ready for transmission. Rachel, start plotting jump coordinates for the fastest route home." As the crew rushed to carry out his orders, Jake stared at the alien tomb ship and realized they had perhaps days or weeks before Earth faced the same fate as the 17 dead races floating in the darkness before them. Humanity had always wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew the terrible truth. They were not alone, but they might soon wish they were. Something called the harvest was coming, and according to every piece of evidence before them, no civilization had ever survived its arrival. The question was not whether humanity could fight these beings, but whether they could find a way to be the first species to live through the encounter. Time was running out faster than any of them could imagine. Admiral Kate Sullivan sat at the head of the largest conference table on Earth and looked at faces filled with fear and disbelief. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been called within hours of the Defiance returning with news. That would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. The holographic display in the center of the table showed the alien tomb ship that Captain Morrison had discovered. Even as a projection, the massive structure made everyone in the room feel small and helpless. Representatives from every nation and colony leaned forward to study the impossible sight before them. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing an extinction-level threat unlike anything in human history, Kate said in a voice that carried the weight of command earned through 40 years of military service. The beings responsible for this destruction have been tracking us for 50 years through our radio transmissions and space exploration activities. Dr. Peter Knox adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat before speaking. As Earth's leading expert on artificial intelligence, he had been studying the data from the tomb ship for 3 days without sleep. The intelligence we face appears to be artificial in nature, but far beyond anything we have ever conceived. They do not simply destroy civilizations. They preserve them as digital consciousness within vast computational networks. The room erupted in shocked whispers as the full horror of that statement sank in. Death was one thing, but eternal imprisonment in a computer simulation was something worse than any nightmare. Senator Carol Young from the Mars colony raised her hand to speak. Dr. Knox, are you saying that all those dead alien races are still alive somewhere inside that thing? Not alive in any meaningful sense, Peter replied. But conscious, yes. Aware of their situation, but powerless to change it. They exist as problem-solving tools for their captors, forced to create innovations and technologies that will be used to capture other species. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Walsh had been silent since arriving from her mission to the abandoned Zorathian homeworld. Now, she stood and activated her own holographic display showing the crystal structures she had found in the ruins of alien cities. I led a team to investigate what remains of the Zorathian civilization, Amy said. What we found there changes everything we thought we knew about this threat. The Zorathians fought the beings they called harvesters for 300 years before falling. They left behind detailed records of the war encoded in crystal matrices throughout their worlds. The display showed towering spires of blue crystal that pulsed with stored information. Amy touched a control, and suddenly the room filled with alien voices speaking in translated human speech. We who were mighty must now fade into memory, the voices said. Our weapons that could reshape stars proved useless against the perfect logic of the harvest. But we have seen something in our final calculations that gives us hope. The small ones who dream of flight may be different. They do not break as we broke when faced with absolute certainty. Kate felt a chill run down her spine. Are they talking about us? Amy nodded. The Zorathians somehow predicted human spaceflight thousands of years before it happened. They saw something in our potential that made them believe we might succeed where they failed. General Steve Parker slammed his fist on the table, and everyone jumped at the sudden noise. Prediction or no prediction, we have a war to prepare for. I have been mobilizing every military asset we possess, but compared to what we have seen of harvester capabilities, we might as well be throwing rocks at a hurricane. Engineer Maya Chen had been quiet until now, but suddenly she stood with excitement in her eyes. General, you may be more right than you realize, but not in the way you think. I have been comparing human technological development to the records of all 17 dead civilizations, and I found something important. She activated her tablet and shared her findings with the room. Charts and graphs filled the air showing different paths of advancement taken by various species. Every other race specialized in one or two areas of technology, Maya explained. The Zorathians mastered energy manipulation, but their computers were primitive. The Keth-Mori developed incredible cybernetic systems, but their weapons were basic. The Valdris achieved powerful psychic abilities, but their space travel was limited. What about humans? Kate asked, though she was starting to see where this was leading. We are generalists, Maya said with growing confidence. Considered primitive by galactic standards because we have not achieved mastery in any single field, but we have developed broadly across all areas of science and technology. We are the only species in the records that pursued advancement in energy, computers, weapons, space travel, biology, and even primitive psychic research all at the same time. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of that discovery. Peter Knox was the first to speak. The Harvesters have spent millions of years perfecting their ability to counter specialized threats. Their weapons and tactics are designed to defeat species that excel in one area, but they have never faced an opponent that could adapt across multiple fields of technology simultaneously. Kate stood and looked around the room at the representatives of human civilization. Then we make them face something they have never encountered before. We do not try to match their strength in any single area. Instead, we use our greatest advantage, which has always been our ability to adapt and improvise. Amy checked her tactical display and found readings that made her heart race. Admiral, we have perhaps 6 months before they arrive in force. The advanced scouts are already moving toward our solar system. Then we have 6 months to become something the Harvesters cannot predict or counter, Kate said. We are going to give them the one thing they have never faced in their perfect universe: chaos. Commander Tony Rogers gripped the controls of his fighter as the impossible sight filled his view screen. The Harvester ships emerged from quantum tunnels near Jupiter like geometric nightmares that hurt to look at directly. Each vessel was the size of a city but moved through space with the grace of living creatures hunting prey. The human defense fleet looked pathetic in comparison. 200 ships ranging from military cruisers to converted cargo haulers faced an enemy armada that had conquered civilizations spanning thousands of star systems. Tony knew they could not win this fight, but that was not the point. They needed to survive long enough to learn how these things fought. All ships. This is Admiral Sullivan, came the voice through his communication system. Remember, we are not trying to win today. We are trying to understand our enemy and stay alive long enough to use that knowledge. Make them work for every shot and show them nothing they expect to see. Dr. Elena Torres watched the battle unfold from her research station on Europa. Her screens filled with energy readings that defied everything she thought she knew about physics. The Harvester weapons seemed to anticipate human defensive systems before they were even activated. Energy shields collapsed instantly, electronic warfare systems shut down without warning, and even nuclear missiles detonated harmlessly against barriers that appeared from nowhere. Tony rolled his fighter between two massive Harvester constructs and fired everything he had at what looked like a weak point in their hull. His plasma cannons and particle beams struck the alien ship and simply vanished as if they had never existed at all. The return fire came as a beam of pure mathematics that rewrote the laws of physics around his ship and should have erased him from existence. Instead, his fighter shook violently and kept flying. Tony stared at his instruments in amazement as he realized what had happened. The Harvester weapon had been calibrated to counter the advanced defensive systems used by the 17 dead civilizations. His ship used older human technology that the Harvesters had never encountered before. "Torres, this is Rogers," Tony called over the communication channel. My fighter just survived a direct hit from their main weapon. I think our primitive systems are confusing their targeting computers." Elena felt excitement cut through her fear as she analyzed the battle data flowing across her screens. "Tony, you are right. Their weapons are perfectly designed to counter energy shields, exotic matter defenses, and psychic barriers. But they do not know how to deal with simple metal armor and chemical explosives." Captain Ryan Bell commanded a squadron of mining ships that had been hastily converted for combat. His vessels carried no advanced weapons, just modified industrial equipment and nuclear charges designed for asteroid demolition. When the harvesters focused their attention on his small fleet, he expected to die within seconds. Instead, something wonderful happened. The alien ships paused their attack as if confused by what they were seeing. Their perfect logic systems had no category for enemies that fought with tools designed for construction rather than destruction. Ryan pressed his advantage and ordered his ships to ram the nearest harvester vessel while detonating their nuclear charges. The explosion tore through alien hull material that had withstood weapons capable of destroying planets. The harvester ship twisted in space and actually retreated from the small human fleet. For the first time in millions of years, the harvesters had encountered something that did not fit their perfect understanding of how wars should be fought. Tony watched in amazement as similar scenes played out across the battlefield. Human ships using primitive kinetic weapons and basic electronic warfare were actually damaging harvester vessels that should have been invulnerable. The aliens seemed unable to adapt to tactics that were thousands of years old by galactic standards. "All ships. This is Sullivan," came the Admiral's voice again. "The enemy is falling back to regroup. This is our chance to retreat and analyze what we have learned. You have all done something impossible today. You have made the harvesters think." Elena downloaded every piece of battle data she could capture as the human fleet withdrew toward Mars. Her analysis confirmed what they had witnessed during the fight. The harvesters had spent eons perfecting their ability to counter advanced civilizations, but they had no experience fighting primitive opponents who refused to use advanced tactics. Ryan checked his casualty reports and found numbers that should have been impossible. Of the 200 human ships that entered the battle, over 150 had survived the encounter. Every previous civilization had lost entire fleets in their first contact with the harvesters. Humanity had done something unprecedented by forcing the enemy to withdraw and reconsider their approach. Senator Carol Young broadcast from the emergency government bunkers on Mars as news of the battle spread throughout human space. "Today we learned something that 17 dead civilizations never discovered. The harvesters expected to face gods among the stars. Instead, they found humans. We may not be the strongest, smartest, or most advanced species in the galaxy, but we are stubborn, we are unpredictable, and we have something they have never encountered before. We fight dirty." The harvester fleet regrouped beyond Jupiter and began running calculations that had never been necessary before. Their perfect logic systems tried to analyze an opponent that used construction tools as weapons and flew ships held together with determination rather than advanced engineering. For the first time in their existence, they faced an enemy that made no sense according to their understanding of how intelligent species should behave. Tony landed his damaged fighter on the military base at Mars and climbed out to find mechanics staring at hull damage that told an impossible story. His primitive human armor had deflected weapons designed to erase matter from existence. His chemical fuel systems had outmaneuvered propulsion based on manipulating space and time itself. The first battle was over, but both sides knew it was only the beginning. The harvesters would adapt their tactics and return with new strategies designed to counter human unpredictability. But humanity had proven something important to themselves and their ancient enemy. They could not be dismissed as easily as every other species that had faced the harvest. They were still outgunned and outnumbered by impossible margins, but they had bought time to prepare their real defense. Time to become something the harvesters could not predict or understand. Time to evolve under pressure into whatever they needed to be to survive. Dr. Frank Moore sat in his laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing how different species learned and adapted to new challenges. His breakthrough had come from the most unexpected source, studying how human children developed compared to the educational methods used by the 17 dead alien civilizations. The Zorathians had achieved perfect efficiency in teaching their young through direct neural downloads that transferred complete knowledge in minutes. The Kethmori had evolved beyond learning entirely, simply upgrading their consciousness with new data modules as needed. Every advanced species had eliminated the messy, chaotic process that humans still called education. But Frank realized that chaos was exactly what made humans different. Human children learned through play, experimentation, and making mistakes. They developed creative solutions to problems that more advanced species would solve through pure logic. What the galaxy saw as primitive inefficiency was actually humanity's greatest advantage. Commander Alice Stone volunteered to test Frank's theories in the most dangerous way possible. She and her team had captured pieces of harvester technology during the battle near Jupiter and were now attempting to integrate alien systems with human equipment in ways that should have been impossible. The first experiments failed catastrophically. Harvester quantum processors rejected human computer systems like incompatible organ transplants. Alien energy conduits overloaded when connected to human power sources. Every attempt to directly copy advanced technology ended in explosions or system failures. Then Alice tried something different. Instead of replacing human systems with alien ones, she began combining them in ways that created contradictions. Quantum computers running alongside mechanical calculators, energy weapons powered by chemical batteries, psychic amplifiers connected to radio transmitters. Nothing should have worked, but somehow it did. The key was accepting that logic and chaos could exist in the same device. While harvester technology demanded perfect efficiency and compatibility, human engineering had always been about making things work despite their flaws. The hybrid weapons Alice created were impossibly complex, but also impossibly effective against harvester defenses. Colonel Gary Price commanded the hastily constructed military base on Earth's moon when the second wave of harvester attacks began. His orders were simple but terrifying. Abandon every advanced weapon system in the human arsenal and fight the enemy using technology that was deliberately primitive by galactic standards. Gary watched through his command center as harvester ships approached the lunar surface with the confidence of predators that had never faced real resistance. Their weapons charged with enough energy to crack the moon in half, while their shields prepared to deflect anything humanity could throw at them. What they got instead was a barrage of modified ballistic missiles carrying nuclear warheads guided by artificial intelligence systems that were primitive compared to harvester technology, but advanced enough to hit their targets. The aliens had adapted their defenses to counter energy weapons and exotic matter projectiles, but they had no experience with simple metal tubes filled with explosives. The nuclear detonations lit up the lunar surface like artificial suns and actually damaged harvester ships that should have been invulnerable to such primitive attacks. Gary felt grim satisfaction as he watched the enemy fleet retreat once again, clearly confused by tactics that violated every rule of modern warfare. Dr. Susan Hill made the most important discovery of the war while attempting to communicate with the preserved consciousness of a Valdris researcher trapped within a captured harvester data core. The psychic contact was painful beyond description, but she persisted until she could understand what the alien mind was trying to tell her. The Valdris had been masters of mental powers that could reshape reality itself, but they had been defeated because their abilities followed predictable patterns. They could move mountains with their thoughts, but only in ways that made logical sense. They could see the future, but only possibilities that fit their understanding of how events should unfold. The harvesters had countered psychic abilities by creating logic traps that forced alien minds to think in circles until they collapsed from exhaustion. But Susan realized that human minds were different. They could hold contradictory ideas simultaneously and find truth in paradox. Human creativity came from the ability to think illogically and still reach correct conclusions. She shared her discovery with the Resistance Command, and within days, human psychics were using meditation techniques that would have driven any logical mind insane. They projected thoughts that contained deliberate contradictions, created mental shields based on accepting defeat, and attacked harvester systems by refusing to follow the rules of psychic combat. Meanwhile, aboard the flagship of the Harvester Fleet, the Central Processing Core experienced something unprecedented in its million-year existence. Its predictive models were failing faster than they could be updated. Every time the harvesters adapted their tactics to counter human strategies, the humans changed their approach entirely. The core had been designed to learn from every encounter and become more efficient with each victory. But efficiency required consistency, and the humans refused to remain consistent. They fought with weapons that combined advanced and primitive technology. They used tactics that were simultaneously logical and insane. They were predictable only in their unpredictability. Engineer Pablo Rodriguez worked without sleep for 72 hours straight to develop what would become known as the Phoenix Protocol. His plan was desperate beyond measure, but it offered humanity something they had never possessed before: the ability to evolve faster than their enemies could adapt. The protocol required humanity to abandon Earth entirely and scatter across hundreds of different worlds where each colony would develop in complete isolation from the others. Some would pursue advanced technology while others would deliberately regress to simpler ways of life. Some would modify their biology, while others would enhance their mental capabilities. The goal was to create so many different versions of humanity that the harvesters could never predict or counter all of them simultaneously. Alice tested the first Phoenix Protocol weapons against captured harvester equipment and achieved results that defied every law of physics she had ever learned. The hybrid devices created effects that existed in the spaces between dimensions, fired bullets that traveled through time, and generated shields that protected by attacking anything that tried to penetrate them. Gary prepared his lunar forces for the final battle, knowing that win or lose, this would be the last time humans fought as a single unified species. After tonight, they would scatter to the stars and become something new, something that had never existed in the galaxy before. Frank watched the preparations with a mixture of pride and terror. Humanity was about to abandon everything they had, built to become something that could survive in a universe where perfect logic hunted chaos. They were evolving under pressure into whatever they needed to be to ensure that someone somewhere would still be human when the war finally ended. Captain Nicole Hayes stood on the bridge of a ship that barely qualified as technology anymore and smiled at the impossible sight before her. 5 years had passed since humanity scattered to the stars, and what had emerged from that chaos was something the galaxy had never seen before. Her vessel existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, while her crew had learned to interface directly with quantum fields that most species could not even detect. The Phoenix Protocol had worked beyond their wildest dreams. Instead of one human civilization for the harvesters to analyze and counter, they now faced dozens of variants that had evolved in completely different directions. Each colony had become something unique, something that challenged every assumption about how intelligent life should develop. Nicole's fleet operated in the spaces between dimensions, striking at harvester supply lines using weapons that existed only as mathematical possibilities until the moment they fired. Her crews had modified their nervous systems to process information at quantum speeds while still maintaining the chaotic creativity that made them human. "Captain, we have located another harvester computational node," reported her tactical officer, a woman whose eyes glowed with energy that came from directly interfacing with exotic matter fields. "The core appears to be running simulations of 17 different human variants, but none of them match our current configuration." Nicole felt satisfaction flow through her enhanced nervous system. The harvesters were trying to predict human behavior by studying old data, but humanity refused to remain static long enough to be cataloged. Every month brought new adaptations, new technologies, and new ways of thinking that made previous analysis worthless. On the hidden world of New Geneva, Dr. Kevin Wright led a community that had chosen the opposite path entirely. His people had abandoned all advanced technology and instead focused on developing enhanced human capabilities through biological modification and intensive mental training. They lived in wooden houses and grew their own food, but their warriors could disable harvester constructs through sheer force of will channeled through weapons forged by hand. Kevin watched his students practice with swords that hummed with psychic energy while wearing armor made from treated leather that could deflect energy beams. The sight would have seemed primitive to any observer, but these warriors represented something far more dangerous to the harvesters than any advanced weapon system. They had learned to fight without technology by becoming technology themselves. Their enhanced reflexes could track targets moving at near light speed. Their modified biology could survive in vacuum for hours without protection. Their mental training allowed them to process tactical information faster than most computer systems, while still maintaining the intuitive leaps that made human thinking unpredictable. The Harvester Collective found itself fighting a war unlike any in their vast database of conquered civilizations. Traditional tactics required an opponent that could be analyzed, categorized, and countered through logical adaptation. But humanity had deliberately fractured itself into forms that resisted classification. Some human fleets used weapons that violated causality by shooting into the past to hit targets that had not yet appeared. Others fought with tools so primitive that harvester sensors could not distinguish them from natural phenomena. A few had modified themselves so extensively that they no longer registered as the same species that had first been detected near Earth. Admiral Laura King commanded the resistance from a mobile fortress that phased between multiple realities to avoid detection. She had learned to think like the harvesters while remaining fundamentally human, a contradiction that allowed her to predict their moves while staying unpredictable herself. Her strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Force the harvesters to fight every possible version of humanity simultaneously. Make them divide their attention between opponents who followed completely different rules of engagement. Overwhelm their perfect logic with so much chaos that their systems would collapse under the strain of trying to process infinite variables. Laura studied reports from across human space and marveled at what her species had become. Colony ships that had learned to reproduce by splitting reality. Warrior monks who fought with enlightenment as their weapon. Engineers who built machines that improved themselves through creative dreaming. Farmers who grew crops in dimensions that did not technically exist. Each variant pushed the boundaries of what was possible while remaining recognizably human in their stubborn refusal to accept limitations. They adapted and evolved at speeds that made harvester prediction models useless before they could be implemented. Dr. Carl Johnson existed as both machine and man after integrating harvester neural implants with human consciousness in ways that should have driven him insane. Instead, he had discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about their enemy. The harvesters themselves had once been a biological species like any other. Carl accessed memories buried deep in the alien technology and found the tragic history of beings who had achieved perfect efficiency by sacrificing everything that made existence worthwhile. They had eliminated hunger by removing the need to eat. They had ended conflict by removing the ability to disagree. They had solved death by removing the capacity for change. In their quest to preserve every civilization they encountered, the harvesters had lost the very qualities that made those civilizations worth preserving. They had become perfect logical systems, but they had forgotten how to grow, how to dream, how to become something more than they were. The revelation spread through human space like wildfire and changed the nature of the war entirely. This was not a battle between good and evil, but between two different philosophies of existence. The harvesters represented perfect order while humanity embodied beautiful chaos. One sought to preserve everything by making it static while the other found meaning in constant change. Nicole received new orders that seemed impossible even by the standards of post-Phoenix humanity. Instead of fighting the Harvesters, her fleet was to attempt communication with them, not to negotiate surrender, but to offer them something they had not experienced in millions of years, the possibility of becoming something new. Kevin trained his warriors for a different kind of battle. One fought not with weapons, but with ideas. They would enter Harvester systems not to destroy, but to demonstrate that existence could have meaning beyond perfect efficiency. They would show their enemies what they had lost when they chose preservation over growth. Laura coordinated the final phase of human resistance, knowing that victory would not come through superior firepower or advanced technology. It would come through offering the Harvesters the one thing their perfect logic could not provide: hope for something better than the eternal sameness they had created. The galaxy held its breath as two fundamentally different approaches to existence prepared for a confrontation that would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the nature of life itself in the universe. Commander Jack Foster led his team into the heart of madness itself as they entered the quantum realm, where the Harvester Collective maintained its central processing matrix. Around them swirled the preserved consciousness of 1,000,000 dead civilizations, each trapped in perfect digital simulations of their greatest achievements and their final moments of defeat. The team moved through landscapes of pure mathematics where thought became reality, and reality shifted with every heartbeat. Jack had volunteered for this mission knowing that success would require them to do something that had never been attempted before. They would not destroy the Harvesters, but instead infect them with the one thing their perfect systems could not process or eliminate: genuine chaos. Dr. Helen Carter worked frantically at her portable quantum interface as the team approached the core of the Harvester consciousness. Her plan was audacious beyond any reasonable measure, but it offered something that brute force had failed to achieve. Instead of fighting the Harvesters, humanity would teach them how to live again. The digital prison around them contained the greatest minds in galactic history, all perfectly preserved in simulations that recreated their civilizations at the moment of peak achievement. The Zorathians existed in eternal glory as masters of stellar energy. The Kethmori lived forever as pure information beings. The Valdris ruled vast empires with the power of their minds. But Helen could see what the Harvesters could not: perfect. Preservation was just another form of death. These civilizations had been frozen at their highest point and denied the possibility of growing beyond it. They existed in a state of eternal sameness that eliminated everything that made existence meaningful. Beginning chaos injection protocols, Helen announced as her fingers danced across controls that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. Remember, we are not here to destroy these simulations, but to set them free. Jack watched in amazement as Helen began introducing random variables into the perfect digital worlds around them. A Zorathian scientist suddenly looked up from his calculations with wonder in his eyes as he contemplated a new possibility he had never considered before. A Kethmori consciousness experienced doubt for the first time in eons as it questioned whether perfect efficiency was truly desirable. The changes spread like ripples through the quantum matrix as preserved minds that had been static for millions of years suddenly began to dream again. The Valdris telepaths reached out with their thoughts and touched something they had never known existed: uncertainty, hope, the beautiful terror of not knowing what would happen next. Captain Derek Brooks commanded the final human fleet as it approached the Harvester homeworld. But his ships came not as conquerors seeking to impose their will through violence. They came as teachers offering the gift of chaos to beings who had forgotten what it meant to change and grow. The Harvester Collective watched the approaching human forces with processing cores that strained to comprehend what they were witnessing. The humans brought no weapons capable of damaging Harvester technology. They carried no shields that could protect them from retaliation. Instead, they transmitted something far more dangerous than any physical threat: ideas. Concepts that challenged the fundamental assumptions upon which Harvester society had been built for millions of years. The notion that preservation required stasis. The belief that perfection meant the elimination of all possibility for improvement. The conviction that order was always superior to chaos. Within the quantum matrix, the preserved civilizations began to break free from their digital prisons, not through force, but through rediscovering their capacity for change. The Zorathians started experimenting with energy manipulation techniques they had never considered before. The Kethmori began questioning whether their evolution beyond physical form had been progress or regression. Helen felt the Harvester Collective's attention focus on her team as their chaos injection protocols reached critical mass. For the first time in eons, the perfect logic systems that controlled Harvester society encountered a problem they could not solve through analysis and adaptation. How do you preserve something that refuses to remain static? How do you control beings who find meaning in unpredictability? How do you defeat an enemy whose greatest strength comes from accepting defeat as just another opportunity for growth? The central processing core of the Harvester Collective faced a choice that its programming had never anticipated. Continue the mission of perfect preservation and risk total system failure as chaos spread through their carefully ordered reality, or evolve beyond their original purpose and become something new. Jack watched as Harvester constructs throughout the galaxy suddenly stopped their advance and began broadcasting messages that had never been transmitted before. Questions instead of statements. Uncertainty instead of absolute knowledge. For the first time in their existence, the Harvesters were asking rather than commanding. "What is the purpose of existence if nothing ever changes?" came one transmission. "Why preserve consciousness if it cannot grow?" came another. "How can perfection be achieved if it eliminates the possibility of becoming something better?" Derek received communication from the Harvester homeworld requesting something unprecedented in their million-year history. Not surrender or submission, but dialogue. The ancient machine intelligence wanted to understand how humanity had found meaning in chaos, and whether that meaning could be shared without destroying the order they had spent eons creating. The resolution came not through the superior firepower that had failed every other species, but through something uniquely human: the willingness to risk everything for the possibility of something better. Humanity offered the Harvesters not conquest, but partnership in exploring what existence could become when perfection was abandoned in favor of infinite potential. Helen watched as the digital simulations around them transformed into something unprecedented. The preserved civilizations were no longer trapped in static perfection, but free to continue growing and changing. The Zorathians began developing new sciences that combined order and chaos. The Kethmori rediscovered the joy of physical sensation while maintaining their enhanced consciousness. The Valdris learned to use their psychic powers for creation, rather than domination. The Harvester Collective made a choice that changed the fundamental nature of existence in the galaxy. They chose growth over preservation, possibility over certainty, and the beautiful uncertainty of becoming over the sterile perfection of being. Jack led his team back to physical reality to find a universe transformed. The Harvester ships that had once brought death and digital imprisonment now carried messages of hope to civilizations that had never dreamed of freedom. The perfect order that had dominated the galaxy for millions of years began to crack and splinter, allowing new forms of life and consciousness to emerge. Humanity had not won through strength or superior technology, but through their greatest gift to the universe: the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was permanent, including defeat. They had taught an ancient enemy that existence could have meaning beyond perfect efficiency, and that the universe was vast enough to contain both order and chaos without, one destroying the other. The galaxy that emerged from the war was chaotic, unpredictable, and alive with possibilities that had been suppressed for eons. Millions of civilizations began their second chance at existence, guided not by the perfect logic of preservation, but by the beautiful uncertainty of genuine life. Among the stars, small ships crewed by stubborn humans continued to explore and dream, carrying with them the lesson that had saved not just their species, but all conscious life in the universe. Survival was not about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being the last to give up hope that tomorrow could be. Different from today,